a lot of films that I really love don't necessarily have to have the best descriptions or the best taglines, but there's a film that is relatively well received called Timer, released in 2009. It's got 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's across 12,000 reviews. So it's really relatively well known and pretty well received. And I have to say I agree with that rating. It was definitely the description of this film that drew me in, because it sounded amazing, and I'm pleased to say that the execution was pretty great. So the description from IMDb is as follows. If a clock could count down to the moment you meet your soulmate, would you want to know? I think that is so fascinating, and part of me just wants to sit and philosophize about that concept rather than talking about the film, but I will focus on the film because it is really good. It's directed and written by Jack Schaefer and stars Emma Caulfield Ford, and to be honest, it's a lot better than I expected as well. Basically, they get a timer implanted in their wrist, and it constantly shows this kind of this countdown of when you're going to meet your soulmate. But there is a problem where if your soulmate hasn't got theirs implanted yet, yours won't show correctly, and that's what Una is facing. Una is, of course, our protagonist, played by Emma Caulfield Ford, and that's a little bit of a dilemma. But it's really interesting to kind of watch the narrative unfold. There are obviously problems and pitfalls that our protagonist has to overcome, and I think her development as a character is really interesting, particularly given that, you know, the seriousness almost of the narrative. Now, this is a comedy, and it is entertaining. It's not, I wouldn't say it's hilarious, but it's funny enough to be classed as a comedy. But for me, the interesting part is the narrative and what they're going to do with this. They could do so many things with this. But for me, it was just seeing how other characters responded to this. There are obviously the characters who are very enthusiastic about having this countdown. There are the characters who are obviously against this. Una's kind of, well, she's in a sticky situation because it's not working as well as it should be for her. And there's obviously the anticipation of what's going to happen, when's it going to work. Does that mean any of the characters that are currently in the film are not going to be her soulmates? Or is it possible that one of them would be and they just haven't had the thing implanted? There are a lot of questions that this film delivers, and it answers them at a really great pace. The development of the narrative is really pleasing. And ultimately, I just think it takes such a fascinating concept and delivers it in a really enjoyable, entertaining and thought-provoking way. Casting seems to be really good. Obviously no issues with the acting or the lighting or the set locations. Everything is good or above. But the narrative for me is great. Maybe even fabulous, because I just think it's so fascinating and so well delivered. My question, of course, is would you want to know? I genuinely, I don't know. I mean, it must be quite, on the one hand, it would be nice to know that actually you will one day meet your soulmate and this is when. It also kind of suggests that you're not going to die before that time. Whether or not that would be how it works, I don't really know. But at the same time, you could be in a committed relationship with somebody you love and you get this implanted and it says you'll meet your soulmate in however many days, weeks, months or years. Be a pretty tricky situation. But ultimately, it is brilliant. It did make me question a lot of things in a good way. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's less well known than it should be. I won't say it's underrated, because it seems like the people who have seen it have really enjoyed it. But I do think that it needs more attention and more love. The love that it's been given is completely deserved, but it needs more. Check it out. I promise you'll enjoy it. If you want to let me know your thoughts on the idea of this implant, I'd be very happy to hear what you think of that. But for now, very happy to recommend Timer.